and it helps get kids some good experience in life, in marketing. It's just a fabulous program. ScrantonRoadMinistries.org or ScrantonRoadPromo.org for more information. Sorry, I'm eating my breakfast while we talk here. There's a little bit of burp there.
What's up, YouTube? I see you, YouTube. And people, I'm Brian and Jannelle. Facebook, hello, good morning. Mike, I'm sure, is on. Callie, we got several people on. They are ready for this conversation, Brian.
Yeah,
Mike, Callie, Gary, Team Brian.
I don't know how many people will spill over from on air today, but it was a busy morning. And to give you some context, from about 7 to 7:40, Dr. Craig Hendrickson joined us. He's a professor at Moody and co-host of the Just Gospel podcast. And we had a discussion with him, just scratching the surface of the case of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor? Breonna Taylor. And she was killed by police officers basically just after she was woken up by them when they busted in her house in a search warrant. There were no drugs there. It was kind of most experts are saying the warrant was not a great idea.
Oh, wow.
We don't have time to go over all the details of the case, but nonetheless, her family settled the civil suit with a $12 million settlement, along with some reforms in policing in Louisville, Kentucky, where this took place. And the family was quoted as saying, "True justice is not served with cash settlements. We need accountability, we need justice." So we talked with Dr. Hendrickson about, well, what is justice here and what's a Christian to do with this case? Is the cash settlement justice? Or is the family perhaps making a good point that maybe it's not justice? I'm sure this is going to come up on Friday on the show.
Oh, yeah, it is. Or even them feeling like it's a part of justice. So maybe they don't feel like, oh, this is like, not dismissing it, but just saying we're not done.
Yeah, they didn't say
more.
We don't like this.
Yeah.
They felt it was appropriate for a civil settlement.
Yeah.
But they don't. But the criminal case is still under investigation, and I think they're hoping for criminal charges. You'll have to read more about that. There's a lot of really great stuff. The New York Times did a good summary of what took place. If you Google it, you can find it. Washington Post did a nice piece on the settlement. But then we moved on with our business.
Just, wow.
You didn't spill on the thing, though,
and
right?
it's covered. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. No, it's just, oh my gosh. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like,
I know you're
covered.
all right.
It's covered.
All
All right,
right.
go.
So we moved on with our business, did some other stuff. John Laughlin was on. It was great fun. He's the local meteorologist. Dr. Radelnik was answering your Bible questions. He just came in, do his regular thing. He lives in another city, another state.
Dr. Radelnik.
Yeah, doing his own thing. He didn't know we had the earlier discussion. All of us have that context as part of today's show. And Dr. Radelnik brought up some thoughts about defund the police and police officers in general that sounded contradictory to what Dr. Hendrickson was saying.
Yeah.
I think if you really sat down those two guys for a great conversation, you'd find not very much disagreement. But nonetheless, it caused a little bit of a kerfuffle in text message.
Hilarious.
Dr. Radelnik responded to that. We talked to him about it. He talked about how he certainly acknowledges systemic injustice as a problem. He's written about that. He got heat for it in the past. He also talked about how there statistically is seriously an issue with over-policing / pulling over people of African American descent more often than others, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But a lot of people want to just kind of air their thoughts about this concern or about this issue.
And I think it stood out that it sounded contradictory. When you have two big topics,
Yeah.
I think that's what made Dr. Radelnik's comments stand out more. But it wasn't planned. He doesn't talk about that. I mean, that's just not his thing, right?
Yeah, it wasn't planned, and it's one of those where I wish we could do better as a church, ignoring the way the world talks about these things, and do a better job of talking about them the way that the Lord would want us to, where we're slow to speak and quick to listen, where we're displaying love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, where we've talked about 1 Corinthians 13 and God's definition of love, believes all things, and therefore we ought to give each other benefit of the doubt. I can tell you, Michael Radelnik's my friend. Some of the people say, he doesn't get it. No, he gets it. He may not agree with you on all the finer points of the issues.
Yeah.
But he gets it. So,
Yeah.
So I feel like we need benefit of the doubt more than
Yes.
anything else, don't you?
I agree. And with this, but then also with each other, like you said, because some people texted and said, wouldn't it be nice if we start talking about solutions? And I think before we even get there, like you said, what you're talking about this topic like the Bible would have us talk about it, and then giving each other the benefit of the doubt so that we set a tone of let's move forward with solutions, even if, like you said, with somebody like Rydalnik, we might disagree on finer points, but we can move together toward a solution.
Yeah, and we should definitely work towards solutions, but I find that amusing in some respects because there's different principles that would contradict this thinking in that in recovery from addiction, step one is acknowledging you have a problem. And there's a significant measure of the population who doesn't acknowledge a problem exists.
Right, yeah.
So if you're an alcoholic, you don't acknowledge you're an alcoholic, you're not going to be able to fix your problem.
Yeah.
So how can we talk solutions until we can reach consensus that there's a problem?
But it sounds like even those, because you said with Rydalnik, you can agree there's a problem and still disagree on final
Sure.
fine details and
How do you do that?
definitions and
Extend grace, ask questions, try to
Yeah.
understand each other, realize that I might not be right in everything and you may not be right in everything, and we can maybe work together to find solutions.
yeah.
But even with repentance, if you're repentant, you say, what I did was wrong, this happened, it's wrong, I'm sorry, and now I'm going to move to be better.
Yeah.
You can't skip the I'm wrong and I'm sorry part. So we as a society can't skip over the it's a problem part and start working on solutions. I
Yeah.
feel like that's rushing a process that doesn't need to be rushed. So that's just my 2 cents on the deal.
So, interesting. Yvonne on YouTube. YouTube, I see you. You need to subscribe. Subscribe so you can stay connected to the videos and updates. We got awesome things coming in months to come. Yvonne says, good morning. You won't believe this, but JD Greer is speaking on the same topic. He follows our morning show, and he said on Moody Radio, no?
Is the show after? He's not following our show. He doesn't listen to us.
Oh, I meant like it follows. Oh, yeah, you were like, no. Yeah, he don't listen to us.
His out right now.
Romans 13, his opening statement. If the authorities do injustice, they have to give account to God.
But see, no, Yvonne, I'm glad you brought that up. I have no idea that was going to happen. I'm not in charge of any of that. I'm barely
He
in charge
ain't
of
in
myself.
charge of nothing.
I don't know what anyone's going to be preaching about today on this radio station. Nobody tells. Well, I guess they tell me. I don't have time to look at it. So, but this is why we try to yield to the Holy Spirit's leading, and that we know God's ultimately the executive producer of the show, right? So, we weren't even planning on talking about this after Dr. Rydalnik, and we did.
We actually had a topic set aside. We promised people at 6:30.
Yeah.
It was just like you said, the Holy Spirit took control. And
So we just yield to that, and God does His thing.
Yeah.
So that happened again, I guess, with J.D. Greer.
Amy says, thank you for your discussion. I am a very white, middle-aged woman who grew up.
I was going to say so is Jannelle, but you're just middle-aged.
Yeah,
You're not very white. I'm the very white one, but
Yeah,
I'm not
very
middle-aged. Go
white.
ahead.
Who grew up and lives in very rural Ohio. I have very little interaction with the African American community because there are not many in my area. Thank you for the insights into this issue. Wow, I like her heart.
Yeah, and you know what, Amy? That's more the heart I'm looking for in this, where the world wants you to argue about it. The world wants us to pick sides, start screaming at each other. I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in hearing and loving each other.
See, if Amy, we're very different. We look very different. Our experiences are very different. Just that would make me want to sit with her on her front porch and talk about this, even if we disagree. Because she's saying, I want to hear more about your experience. You know, there are people, it's kind of like what Ashrita Chuchu was talking about last week about humility. And when she talked to the Lord about this topic, how she came out of it 2 weeks later saying, man, I don't know what to do. And it made her approach relationships with humility. Like, tell me more. You know, I love that. So thank you, Amy.
You see Gary's comment?
Praying for Team Brian for the new game. No, Gary. I am the winner, and I was gracious and Christ-like, and I let him tie, but I'm the winner, and it's going to happen next week. I'm going to win. Rob, he doesn't even know types of carpet. Who doesn't know that?
We're just not even listening to that.
Robert says, there's some irony here. Brian, let someone else speak on Hot Topic. on a hot topic, and Brian still has to handle the heat.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Oh, that's funny, because you straight up would throw people under the bus.
I mean, today I'm like, we're going to talk about Breonna Taylor, but we're not. This guy is, and I had someone else do it. No one got mad at me. And then, yeah, I still had to talk about it. And we're going to, you know, Rob, this is going to come up on Friday.
Yeah, it is.
You know this is going to come up.
Diola, what's up? Patricia says, consider, if what happened to Breonna Taylor happened to one of your loved ones, how would you feel?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. And I know we got to worry about statistics or whatever, but I'm like, dude, one is too many. You know, like what Hendrix was saying about certain communities and how this wouldn't have happened in certain communities. For it to get out of hand like that and somebody to die in their sleep, you know, but I know that you can't address every issue. But, dude, that Breonna Taylor one is crazy. Gary says, Team Brian, everything's about Team Brian. I enjoyed and was very touched on the regrets topic this morning. It helped so much. Aw, listening to this. That's cool. It was probably something I said. Carlton said, God has always been a God of justice.
Yeah.
And Patricia responded to him and said, God is, but we are not. And then Carlton said, man, it's like listening to their conversation. Carlton said to Carlton, what was the same? Oh, no, he's responding to it's like a conversation they're having. Truth, I believe God will serve justice in this situation. Gary says, Brian is a sandbagging on the game. What is that? Secretly keeping it from Team Jannelle. What is that? Sandbagging. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what Gary means, but I'm sure I'll love it when I find out.
He loves
Gary's
you,
the man.
dude.
Would you blame him?
Oh, my goodness. Mike says, I've said this before, but I get frustrated that people, government, society are trying to fix the heart condition of sin with laws and punishment. We need laws, Mike. As long as there's sin in the world, there will be racism and bigotry. That doesn't mean that it should be ignored, and there should be awareness preached. We've come a long way since the 60s and have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, we need laws.
Yeah, and I think it reminds me, Mike's not saying this, but it reminds me of a lot of people will say, well, you know, the real solution to racism in America is just preach the gospel.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the solution because Christ has great teachings for us to move forward on this. But it's only part of the solution. It's not an awkward Band-Aid. We have to address the real issue. In fact, it reminds me of one of my favorite passages where Jesus rebuked the Pharisees, Matthew 23:23. Which sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. So we got people out there that are so fixated on religious practice like tithing, but Jesus is more important for you to worry about justice and mercy and faith.
Miss Anita says, amen, Jannelle. Mike says, certainly we need laws, but it won't fix hearts, only behaviors. I agree. Carlton says, I think if we would just follow the law that God gave, we would be in a much better place. You know, it's kind of like how you've brought up abortion in that context. You know, we don't stop and say, well, just, you know, reach people and change their heart. We want to change the law because there are lives involved. You know, like if you address the law, you would save babies. That's the goal. And so I don't hear that in that conversation. I don't hear people saying, you know what, just talk to women and tell them about Jesus.
The real solution to abortion is just more prayer and more gospel.
We don't hear that.
Not changing laws. And that's a very good point, and that is the contradiction that drives some people nutty, where they go, justice for the unborn, yes, but what about also justice for the African American?
Yeah. Hightower. Sadly, I don't get a voice in this conversation regardless of whether I agree or not. These conversations need to be discussed, but it's not an even field. What is your guess on what he's saying?
I don't know, but would love to have you share...
Hightower.
What you're not feeling like you're getting a voice in the situation. If there's something specific you feel like is being missed, please bring it up. We'd love to talk about it.
Callie says, this is a hard topic to talk about. I'm a big supporter of law enforcement and should honor all the fallen police officers. I have gotten some slack on my Instagram about it. You know what, though? It's like that meme that says, Like, the issue isn't police, it's police brutality. I can speak up against police brutality all day long and still look at a cop that's doing what they got to do and be like, yo, we got to protect police too. Like,
But you know what? I want to bring something up in a second that you've said to me before. But I don't know that we have enough acknowledging the other side's points when we talk about these things.
yeah.
Like you, and I don't think you'll mind me bringing this up, and you can stop me if you don't like it. But you mentioned to me that you saw a cop the other day waving to somebody.
Waving to me.
And what was your thought?
I looked at my sister and I was like, oh my gosh, we had a full conversation. I said, it has to be so hard for them, for the good ones, because they have to be feeling like, dude, I did not, I didn't do this for this. Like, you usually are a little boy. I'm not a little boy or never been, but it's usually like you want to be a hero. You want to rescue. You want to bring protection. And for them to be in this position, most of them have to feel like, what the heck? This isn't what I'm here for. And so I've done it. We've done it a couple times in Shaker. So it caught me because I'm sitting on my front yard and he drives by and waves. And I was just like, wow. And so I waved back. And so now I see them and I'm like super nice. I even told my sister, I've done cookies for the firemen. How about we have the kids bring cookies to the police? Just because it's so tough. But she also said, my sister said, but the good ones, some of the good ones have to be feeling like, I wish there was a better way to get to the solution, but I'm glad they're voicing some of the issues they probably see and can't speak up about or whatever because of what some people call the blue code or, you know. I've met police that see, like, in fact, I'm proud to say the chief of my city is like, dude, I see the problem. And he doesn't, I mean, there's no perfect solution, but I know there are cops out there. Your wife was a cop. I know they see. My father-in-law's
a cop, my neighbor's a cop. But and I'm glad you said that. So here's my point in bringing up that story. You are a person who, in this type of discussion, your husband's been treated poorly by the police on numerous occasions. I know about it personally because my wife ended up helping you guys out and being part of it. You are a person who's upset about systemic injustice. You think racism is a real problematic thing in our society today. Yeah. But here's my thing. I think the best way to have those discussions is for you to lead with what you just said. Like, if you're talking to someone who doesn't necessarily agree with you, if you lead with the story about your empathy for the great officers out there, you might be able to have a great discussion. But here's what happens instead. You know, we got a real problem with policing today. And that person thinks of, like I would, my father-in-law, my wife. And now it's personal. Like, are you kidding me? You're saying that about my father-in-law?
Yeah.
He's one of the good ones. And now you're forced to be in a yeah, but.
Yeah.
But it takes a significant amount of, I think, patience and wisdom for a Christian to lead with acknowledging someone else's point.
Yes.
We refuse to acknowledge points at all in these discussions of the other side because it feels like we've lost the whole debate.
Yes. And what I wanted to show you is I agree. We should lead with that mindset. I think and I'm going to go ahead and speak for a lot of people of color. What we're tired of doing is leading with that or giving the benefit of the doubt and not being heard. And I'm going to tell you things we got to hear that make it frustrating in the context of what you just said. So somebody texted into the show and said, statistics have shown black neighborhoods have higher crime rates. So of course there will be more traffic stops and police presence. So pretty much saying, like, there's comments like that that's like what you have identified as. So what you're saying is people of color are more prone to commit crimes. I've met police that in this conversation have told me, well, you know, a lot of the problem in the city are coming from people of color. When I've talked about my boys. And I've told them, what's that got to do with my boys? I am not the people. Like, they got nothing to do with the people that are committing crimes. They got parents that pay high taxes, and they're entitled to walk the streets just like their white friends. So it's that same feeling of if you're saying, well, there's good cops, like lead with that. It's the same way with a person of color. We got to hear people saying, well, people of color, they're committing crime or whatever. Somebody else texted and was like, if they get stopped, it's probably because they're violating the law. That's why police. Do you see the whole?
And I'm with you.
And
on
I'm
a lot
not
of stuff,
saying
right?
like who's gonna do it first. I'm telling you what's behind the frustration with people of color.
I get it.
For years, we've been dealing with that.
And I get it. We've talked about that. Pastor Tanks has talked about that. But what is the Christian to do with that then?
Yeah.
Tell me, how would the scriptures teach you? You're frustrated because your neighbor is saying things that are generalizations and they might be hurtful. What do you do with that? I'm tired of you and I'm sick of doing this, so I'm going to tell you what's up.
No, I've learned to brush it and move forward in a Christ-like way. What I'm saying is some people, I'm not justifying it, but a lot of people of color, with the negative experiences they're having on the street while they drive, especially black men, at work with all subtle racism and comments you got to hear, it's exhausting, so sometimes it's a lot to ask to be like, well, just be patient. Because, they don't get it.
It is a lot to ask, but God asked all of us to do anyway.
I get it. I'm just giving you the reality of, as a believer, if the church was more mindful of that, they would give more grace to people of color in the tone on the way they talk about stuff.
I agree.
This isn't new. We've been, in the tone of the conversation has always been a certain way. It's always controlled by a certain population, right? Whether it's the media, the tone of the conversation, I don't know, it has been a certain way more often than not.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say I'm a lover of trying to figure out how to promote great discussion.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it involves primarily loving your neighbor and putting their interests above your own. And it sucks, especially in conversations like this, right?
Well, then I'm going to tell you this. It's a little more complicated. If I had a woman that had a history of abuse with men, the way she approaches men and talks about men and talks to men, I'm going to know it's going to have baggage. She's going to be more resentful and more bitter. So I can help do what the Bible says, which is carry her burden, whether it's giving grace, or let's say I was a guy, giving grace, or if I was another woman that hasn't experienced as much pain, helping her walk through that and engage in conversations. So what I'm saying is I'm more able to do that than some of my other friends of color. So maybe coming alongside people like that, whether it's on social media or at the church, and like we got to know there's a reality. There are people out there living in pain because they've experienced a lot of racism. So they're not going to engage in a Christ-like way like they should. So
yeah,
how
absolutely.
about as believers if we help them with that?
It's a two-way street,
isn't it? As they heal and I'm not even saying whites. I'm saying even on this side, being another person of color that's like, let me help you navigate through this. Instead of us looking at each other and saying, no, all of y'all should be acting in a Christ-like way. Some people are hurt and injured,
Which is why in the ideal situation, you've got both people in a conversation behaving biblically.
Yes.
But the sad reality is that when it comes to tense topics, that's almost an impossibility to happen. Someone's got to choose to do it. Maybe it's going to be the person who's like, I need to extend a lot of grace to somebody because I know they're carrying all this pain.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want to hear anything I got to say today.
Yeah.
So today, what I'm going to do is listen. Even if I think half what they're saying is crazy town. And for the other person, it might be that they're going to have to start a conversation with something they didn't normally start with. Like, you know what? I think there's a lot of great cops out there that are getting a bad rap in the midst of this.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think as a society, we need police officers. They're part of Romans 13 in terms of the government's giving them the sword.
Yeah.
That can soften the blow of the rest of the conversation. Somebody's got to do something. And
can I just throw out there, too, I know there's a lot of awesome cops. Most of them are great, all of that. But can we get rid of the blue code and have some of start asking, can some of the good cops that are mad at this speak up and say, we saw it in June. A lot of cops coming out on social media and getting consequences for that from other cops. How about you speak up and break that code and say, dude, I'm here and I see the problem. You don't think it would help with that too? Because for them to say, well, I'm good and that's messed up. Okay, well, then speak up to someone. You got teachers doing it in their profession. Doctors do it. Why can't cops call out their peers?
I think you're absolutely right on that. The reason that discussion is so complicated is because something we've never talked about on here. And it's the idea that since we hand police officers guns and we tell them to get the bad guys, their jobs come with a higher measure of risk and with a higher chance of tragic outcomes. Therefore, they do need special protections.
Yeah.
So a police officer committing some kind of infraction or making a mistake, let's just say making a mistake, should not necessarily, under the eyes of the law, be the same as me making that mistake. Because we're asking them to do so much.
Right. Right.
And so the discussion, you're saying, you're right about the blue wall. But if I'm going to try to think about this on every side of the issue, the reason that is in place is because police officers are afraid that people don't understand that they're held to a higher standard, and we ask them to do things that no one else has to do. And they don't want their colleagues to be imprisoned for a mistake. And so we as a society have to figure out where is this balance, where we're giving appropriate protections, but fixing injustice and brokenness in the system.
You're talking about the bigger mistakes, and I agree. I'm also talking about the little things. You're in the circles, and you hear or see the cop that says the comments, that uses the derogatory terms against blacks. You see stuff. Say something. You know, to see it and not say something, and then for that to turn out to be the cop that does the George Floyd. There were cops that saw his attitude. He had a history. That's what I'm saying. If we had all of that happening at the same time, it would help heal the relationship.
I think it would. But again, it's that it's all happening at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
Sadly, this can't be fixed by one side submitting and saying
Right.
that, oh, you're right about everything.
Absolutely.
This is what everyone's trying to get.
Yes.
On both sides of the issue, we're looking at each other and saying, here's what I need you to do. I need you to sit down and listen, and when I'm done
Yeah.
telling you, you're going to go, wow, I was wrong and everything you just said is right.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
Yeah.
If we believe in the fallen nature of humanity, none of us has it all figured out.
Yeah, we don't.
And if we can't approach conversations with that in mind, it's never going to do any good.
Right. Somebody's calling for a conference with Brian and Tanks.
What?
Brian and Tanks.
Why?
For like. Yes.
Yeah, I'll show up, but I don't think Tanks needs my help.
Mike said something that people are responding to. That is a renew your mind. It's not something that God is doing to hit us with his magic wand and our minds are renewed. We have to know the truth and obey more and more, knowing scripture more and more in order to renew our minds. Plus, we need to have open minds to learn.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
And then people are responding, like to Jannelle says, that makes sense. However, my family and I don't live in a high crime area. Actually, we live in the suburbs of the suburbs. However, when my son gets pulled over, it's not because he's in a bad crime area. It's been because we live in a great area that they feel like he doesn't belong. It's quite sad, overwhelming, frustrating.
Absolutely.
Vida says police don't speak up against their own that often. Police union has a lot of authority and fraternity that they refuse to cross. Those that do tend to be ostracized, fired. There has to be a broad reform that includes stiff penalty, prosecution, and imprisonment, take their pensions, etc. And I get, that's the thing where I'm like, the good cops that are mad, that are like, yo, that's messed up. What are you trying to say? I don't do that. That's kind of a little bit of what they need to start doing. Be a part of the solution. If you're part of a system where you see stuff and don't call it out, however that plays out, I know it's very complicated. That's just a lot to ask, to be like, dude, you ride in this with this dude in the car. Let's just use a specific, and you see stuff and you're not speaking out. Imagine a doctor in the surgery room. You wouldn't say something if you saw some trifling stuff with somebody in anesthesia?
You would. Can I push back a little bit on that, though, just gently on something?
That's fine.
One of our frustrations you and I have shared is this. People bring up black on black crime, right?
Yeah.
And they say, no one's saying anything about black on black crime.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
say
people
stuff all
saying
the
stuff
time.
about that.
Yeah.
I went to an event in the south side of Chicago,
Yeah.
hosted by an organization that's dealing with that issue.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that African American community is not talking about that.
Yeah.
We can't make the same error saying, why don't police say something? When you and I have seen and shared videos where we've got people in authority taking a risk as officers
You
speaking
agree
out
that's
against
very
these things.
rare.
I don't know that even very
Since
rare
you
is the
brought
right...
it up, your wife even said when the chief in my city, who's amazing, called out his own cops, and she was like, "I've never seen a chief do that." That's horrible. That should be normal for
Okay.
a principal should call out, right? So it's not the norm.
So then how should
Even
we
to
characterize
the point
it?
when police were going on Facebook.
But how
in
should we
June,
characterize it?
Okay,
Because
go ahead.
if you say no one's saying it, that's not true.
Oh, no one. Oh, yeah. Oh, so I'm using absolutes. You're saying.
If you say most aren't saying it,
Okay, good. Then
is
I'll
that
say,
true? I don't know if that's true.
I know it's nobody knows. I mean, you would have to see all conversations.
So do you see the problem with that assertion?
Why is there even a term blue coat?
I'm not saying that's not a thing, but what I'm saying is we've got to be fair in how we talk about it.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong here. I'm just trying to say that we got to be sure we're intellectually consistent on this. Because how many black on black crime events have you been to?
I haven't been to any.
Have you seen any events? Like personally?
Yeah.
How many?
I don't know. I don't know. Again.
So, because if it's about proportions, wouldn't it be safe to say in your experience addressing black on black crime is a rare thing? In your personal
in my
experience.
experience, yes. In my experience. I'm just saying I don't.
So
I
therefore,
live,
let's invalidate that as not a thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
No, we can't do that.
But it is an
We
issue
know that there
with
are people-
police.
we know
There's
that there
the
are people-
union. There's the
Listen to me.
police code.
Hear
Come
me
on
clearly.
now.
Hear me clearly. There are people, lots of people, maybe I don't see them myself, that are addressing black on black crime.
Yes.
But in your experience, it's a rarity.
Right.
Okay? I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of people addressing police reform and brokenness in the system, and they're speaking out about it. I haven't witnessed it personally in an event. I've seen some videos.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't want to start characterizing percentages or how many do and how many don't.
Yeah.
What I can say is that there is a blue wall, there's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of reform needed. But there are some great people out there trying to fix it.
Yeah.
So what I can't do is characterize everybody as bad. Or even make the mistake of insinuating that everybody's bad. Or that almost nobody cares. Because I just don't think that's true. Are you mad at me?
I'm not, and I disagree.
About what?
I disagree that it's not most. If it wasn't most, and if there wasn't an issue with that,
I'm not saying
there
it's
would
not
be
most.
no such thing as a blue coat.
Jannelle, you're not hearing me.
It's not absolute, but I still stand with it is most. It is most.
And I'm not saying it's not most.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's it. I mean,
Because
that's what I meant to say.
I can
It
say
is-
most black people have done nothing personally to stop black on black crime in
Right.
organized manner. It doesn't mean that it's not a problem. Do you
Right.
see? So what I'm trying to say is that, of course, it's probably the majority. Of course, it's probably a vast majority.
Yeah.
That there needs to be people that are not saying something that should. But that doesn't, I don't want to discount the existence of people that are doing
Oh
it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I
they're
am
out
not
there.
saying that most are great
Yeah.
in terms of saying something.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to make it seem like nobody is, because I've seen some dramatic
No, right. I
things.
shouldn't have used absolutes. Rob says, "Are there other Moody radio hosts handling conversations like this?"
Yeah, Chris Brooks.
Yeah.
He won't. I don't know if he's gone this far, but
Well, police admit that they know their peers. So Rebecca says, "A cop making a mistake is not the big topic. We want the police to admit they know there are peers that they do not speak up against. The same happens in the medical field too." And Vita says, I think it was Vita. Somebody said it also happens with teachers. Teachers don't call each other out. Oh, Rebecca said that. Hey, Rebecca.
yeah.
Eric says the idea of being looked at as not belonging is an interesting perspective. Maybe a question to ask: how can we help people to be asked or invited to belong in our neighborhoods? That might be a step. Go ahead.
So couldn't we even say that perhaps one of the larger problems is unions then?
I know that's a big issue.
Because what do unions do? Their purpose is to protect their members.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of steelworkers unions, carpenter unions,
Yeah.
teachers unions. And so I'm not saying break up the police union, but in a sense, aren't they doing their job if they're protecting their own?
Not the way it's happening now. I'm not going to say that's like...
But I've seen...
That's a problem.
Okay.
I'm just telling you. You even said with the chief I met with, you were like, because of the union, there's nothing he can do to fix
I
a
agree.
problem that he said exists.
And I
That
work
puts
for,
my son in more danger than his white friend.
I totally
That's
agree.
a problem.
And I to try to illustrate the point I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
I worked for a parks department in a city government, and I saw the streets department, and there was one dude who I never saw lift a shovel. The guy sat in a truck all day long, every day.
Oh yeah, yeah,
They can't fire him.
yeah. Ford's the same. I mean,
Why?
the automotive, yeah,
Why?
because of the union. Yeah. it's
So
no
this
problem.
isn't a problem unique to police.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, maybe we need to address a union issue. It's a union issue larger than just police.
Yeah.
But maybe that's part of the reason why this is a problem, is
And the
because of what
reason
unions
with
do.
police versus teachers and people sitting at the automotive industry with the union is they got a gun. That's what I told the police chief in my city. I'm like, y'all give these people guns, and you got a union that protects against stuff like this. Reem says, Brian, black on black crime is a misnomer created by white media years ago to quiet the black voice from speaking up against injustice. No one ever says, thank you, white on white crime or Asian on Asian. 67% of crime is done by white people on other white people. Also, all crime committed is usually against people they live with. You've said this before, and I'm only reading it because Dr. Jones said, thank you. Every time I hear black on black crime, I get annoyed since we don't classify anything else as white on white, man on man. But you've said that before.
Yeah,
You're just
and
using
I
it
think
because it's... Yeah, go ahead. I'm
It's
sorry.
frustrating because I think a lot of you are missing my point.
I'm sorry. I want you to say, because I know that's frustrating. Say your point. Like, sorry.
Like, and I think
You probably have said it already.
No, and I think also you got to understand. Like, I'm somebody who wants to bring people together, not tear them apart.
And you what you
And-
started off saying is we need to see the issue from the other sides. That's why you're talking about the police and right.
And
you're-
people can get mad at me for
Yeah.
using that term, black
Yeah.
on black crime. Yeah, you make good points about where it comes from. I know how it's used, but I know there are people who regularly make an argument that are mad at us for what we're saying, who say, listen, I think we also need to address crime in black communities.
Yes.
And they call it black on black crime. And so one of the ways for me to bring us together in a discussion is to acknowledge people
Yeah.
and acknowledge points that they make. And when I was talking about, if you listen carefully to what I was saying, when I was addressing black on black crime, I was affirming that African Americans, yes, they do care about that. That was my overall point, was it not?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
please don't take that out of context and turn it into, Brian is now saying this mantra that other people are saying about black on black crime. And I am not saying that. I've never said that.
Right.
I've always been the one that says I went to an event that addresses this issue personally in a black community. So I know what this is about. I'm trying to bring people together.
We're going to revisit this on Follow-Up Friday, I am sure. So I wanted to read Kathy's comment and encourage people to kind of bring that maybe on Friday. She says, it's a very tense situation right now. There's people out there making big bucks going around telling people all white people are racist. Racist. It's the same thing as the racist white people painting people of color with a broad brush. Yes, that's true. How do people come together then? She says she's upset and wants a solution. And somebody texted earlier and said, wouldn't it be nice if we came together and figured out a solution? There is none. I'm just saying people have ideas. Or do you think that, what do you say to that?
I don't know.
You brought up you addressing unions. Oh, okay, are you still discouraged?
No, I'm a little discouraged.
Because you still feel like your point was...
Not by you. No, it's not, nothing to do with
okay.
my point. It's that when you talk about a difficult issue, right, we need to extend each other a ton of grace. And we need to love our neighbors, think of them as more important than ourselves. And so I think we need to work really hard to hear and understand their point.
Yeah.
And so when I'm using a phrase that suddenly becomes the focal point of a discussion, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, wow, that's discouraging.
Yeah.
Like, not only are you missing the point of what I was saying, but how are we ever going to deal with this if we can't use someone else's language and talk about it?
Yeah.
How are we ever going to talk about something like this?
It's kind of like you said, what happens with either submit or defund the police. We get caught up on the term and get distracted. Rebecca's agreeing with unions.
You can look at Dr. Jones.
Where? Here, I actually don't think I missed the point. You're saying we have to be careful of using absolutes and talking about situations, and that we need to be empathic to others' views in order to overcome issues.
Well, yeah, then you do understand it. Thank you.
Mike loves us both. Rebecca says, yes, about unions. I had called out a teacher by asking for a meeting with the principal, and teachers union representative attended, which was the speech teacher who was also labeling my son. The teacher in question was asked to retire. Unions, perhaps, but more than likely labeled as a traitor among peers.
Which is what I'm trying to say. It's more complicated, but
Yeah.
sadly, one side degenerates the whole thing into there really isn't a problem with racism. It's just your problem.
Yeah.
And the other side says, you know what the real problem is? It's just cops.
Yeah.
And it's so much more complicated.
It is
than
very
that.
complicated.
And there are great cops. And
Yeah.
Anyway.
There are great cops. I agree. It just gets touchy when people use it to excuse police brutality. But Brian, I do not believe that's your heart. I appreciate you guys for covering these topics. We can come as close to a solution as we can if we just keep talking to one another. Talking is the biggest deal.
Yeah.
The church has gone too long without talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, talking about it is important.
Yeah. We're good.
Yeah, we are. Wow, this was long. We love y'all. Keep the discussion going. We go back and use it for Follow-Up Friday. And then come with your points on follow-up.
We're going to be talking about this on Friday.
Yeah, we are.
Woo.
Rob, you better call.
I'm not bringing it up.
Somebody was like, Hendrix and Dr. Idonic should be on